All right. So our illustrious mayor, Eric Adams, made a lot of headlines because no one seems to be more excited about the victory of Donald Trump than Eric Adams, who has been, a lot of people are saying, well, he's cozying up to him because he wants him to drop the charges. And he actually addressed that in his press conference. And I must say he's right. He's been bitching about the way the sanctuary city laws tie his hands for a while. He didn't just start complaining about this. But now that Trump has won, he's really doubling down.
Those who are here committing crimes, robberies, shooting at police officers, raping innocent people, have been a harm to our country. I want to sit down and hear the plan on how we're going to address them. Those are the people I am talking about, and I would love to sit down with the Board of Czar and hear his thoughts on how we're going to address those who are harming our citizens.
You're open to that?
Open to
hearing what their plan is to deport some of these folks, and you think the city, in some circumstances, should cooperate with ICE.
Let me.
Okay, so it's a little low, but the reporter very pointedly asked him, because he's saying he wants to coordinate with, what's his name, Tom Homan?
Homan, yeah.
Yeah, the incoming border czar, and he wants to sit down and have a conversation with him. So the reporter is asking him very pointedly, so you're saying you want to work with them to deport immigrants? And his comeback was pretty salty.
You know what's interesting? And I was talking to the team the other day. I want you to all go back and Google Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Google what they said about those who commit crimes in our city and what they said in our country. They said those who commit crimes need to get out right away. That was their position. So this is not a new position, because in the state of, in the era of cancel culture, no one's afraid to be honest about the truth. Well, cancel me, because I'm going to protect the people of this city. And if you come into this country, in this city, and think you're going to harm innocent New Yorkers and innocent migrants and asylum seekers, this is not the mayor you want to be in the city under.
Okay, now I will say, understand, they're specifically, in this context, talking about deporting migrants who are wanted for crimes. So the reporter is really not doing the cause of migrants well by taking the absurd position that that is somehow an abuse of Adams's authority or somehow a bigoted thing to do. Now, he also addressed the cost that New York has incurred without any help from the Biden administration to enact these policies, which have included putting migrants up at the Roosevelt Hotel in Midtown.
We're talking about the migrant, I say $6.4 billion. It's not really resonating. And a lot of people said that, okay, it happened, it's over, we lost the money. And Eric, you said this is going to have a devastating impact on our city. We have not seen the full course of what this did to us. I came into politics because of an 11-year-old boy that was arrested. He was absent from school a substantial number of times, and the DOE never saw him. He was arrested for a robbery two times. The long-term impact of that $6.4 billion has not materialized yet. We could have spent $400 million on community schools to handle chronic absentees. We could have spent $600 million on 2,000 guidance counselors and social workers in schools, $39 million on summer rise and extended hours for 30,000 children, $22 million on MetroCards for 75,000 summer youth employment participants. $200 million could have gone to 1,000 more police officers. $84 million could have gone to 70.
I'm just going to interject here and understand I'm sympathetic to a lot of what he's saying. The last thing New York needs is more cops. You throw a rock out the window, you'll hit a cop in New York. That is Giuliani's true legacy. If our police force were an army, it would be the world's 11th largest army. We don't need 11,000 more cops.
730 park staffs, and you see some of the other numbers. Go to our agencies. Public schools, $33 billion. 50% of what it costs to run HRA went to this crisis. 50%. The police budget is less than what we spent. The entire NYPD is only $6.2 billion. Fire department only $2.6 billion. The impact of those programs that didn't materialize is we created more of those 11-year-old boys that I saw in that precinct, in the 88th precinct. The long-term impact of what we did to this city is you're going to see it materialize in administrations in the future. They hurt the future of New York City. And when people hear me say $6.4 billion, they may say, well, okay, it's just $1 billion here, $1 billion there. No, we didn't invest in seniors the way we should have, and young people the way we should have. We're not going out to get these chronic absentee students the way we should have. The crimes that we witnessed, this impacted our city, and people don't seem to understand, why were you fighting so hard for this? Because I reflected on that 11-year-old boy that was denied, and I went into government to stop these 11-year-old boys, and I came up with a plan to do so, and the federal government made me take $6.4 billion out of providing these services that we all should be angry at what happened to our city under this administration.
Pretty harsh words for the Biden administration. I mean, Keaton talked a little bit about this offline, and the question is, okay, well, if you take all these migrants out of the Roosevelt Hotel, do you put the veterans in? Now, that's an open question. But he is laying out a case that literally, unlike the federal government, the city can't print money. So, yes, if the money comes out of the budget for this, it has to come from somewhere. He's laying out the somewheres that this money could have been spent. That having been said, the hysteria around crime and migrants on every corner, I can tell you I live here. That's exaggerated greatly, but I'll get into it. All right, so New York City Mayor Adams requests meeting with Trump border czar Homan. This might have happened by now. Homan said he was going to call Adams and have a conversation with him. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, long hampered by the Biden administration's immigration policy, said on Tuesday he's requested a meeting with incoming border czar Tom Homan. Quote, I would love to sit down with the border czar and hear his thoughts on how we're going to address those who are harming our citizens, Adams said during a news conference. Find out what his plans are, what our common grounds are. We can work together. Homan has said he's planning to meet with Adams, who said he wants an open dialogue with the new administration. Quote, I don't want people talking at each other. I want people to talk to each other. I made it clear that I'm not going to be warring with this administration. I'm going to be working with this administration, he said. Adams has for months been calling for violent migrants to be deported and seemed to welcome the Trump administration's differing philosophy. Quote, if you come into this country and this city and think you're going to harm innocent New Yorkers and innocent migrants and asylum seekers, this is not the mayor you want to be under, Adams said. I'm an American. Americans have certain rights. The Constitution is for Americans. I'm not a person who snuck into this country. Now, his suggestion is actually legally incorrect. Responding specifically to the mayor's comments that the Constitution is for Americans, the New York Immigration Coalition said, quote, everyone residing in the United States, regardless of their immigration status, has specific inalienable rights under the Constitution, including the right to due process. This is why you have to go through a court process to deport somebody. Otherwise, you wouldn't need that.
Yeah, I just want to interject very quickly. I mean, I don't want to make this the centerpiece of the story since this is largely speculative, but I shouldn't say largely speculative. There's an element of that to it. But don't forget, Eric Adams could very, very possibly be facing jail time. And so, given that possibility, sucking up to Donald Trump is, kind of in his interest to do.
It is.
Maybe get one of those hunter deals.
It is true. However, to be fair, this is not out of keeping with who Adams is.
No, it's not.
The first politician I confronted on the street when we were a tiny little channel was Eric Adams, happened to be downtown. And I confronted him about his policy of continuing solitary confinement. And he lied to my face and said, look it up. And then next time you see me, I want you to say thank you, Eric, for ending solitary
opposing
confinement.
solitary.
And unfortunately, I wasn't planning on confronting him. He happened to be there, and I just did it. So I go home and I look it up. He's for like punitive confinement or something.
Right.
Like
punitive isolation, something like that.
Yeah,
Some Orwellian
literally
term for
exactly the
solitary
same
confinement.
thing.
Yeah.
So Eric Adams has been bitching about the city's legal strictures on what he could do about this for basically his entire term, and certainly since DeSantis and Abbott started sending immigrants to New York. Right. So this isn't coming out of the blue, and it's not inconsistent with his politics.
Right.
Otherwise, I would pretty much chalk it up to that. If all of a sudden Brandon Johnson, if he were in trouble and he started singing this tune, I'd say, well, absolutely. Remember, Adams is a 20-year cop and a Republican.
He's a Republican, yeah.
He was a Republican until he decided to become a Democrat so he could run for mayor.
Right.
Because I think Democrat registrations are like 4-1 in New York for Republicans. On Tuesday, immigration advocates in New York rallied for state funds to fight the possible mass deportation of undocumented immigrants after President-elect Trump is sworn in. There was a time when 4,000 migrants arrived in New York City every week. The influx of migrants reached a high point in January, with 69,000 in the city's care. Last week, it was down to just over 56,000. Since 2022, roughly 250,000 have arrived in New York. Immigration advocates are demanding $165 million in state funding for expanded legal services. Now, this is why I'm telling you this picture that you get from my arch nemesis there, Cash Jordan, or more visibly from the New York Post and from Fox News, that there's a migrant on every corner and it's chaos. It's total bullshit. It's a city of 8 million people, many of whom are immigrants. This isn't like all of a sudden you dropped a bunch of brown people in the middle of Iowa. It's New York. White people are a minority here.
Yeah, half the people could be an immigrant when you walk down the street. You wouldn't know.
Right. You would not notice it. If you ride the 7 train to Flushing, where I'm from, where I grew up, you're going to have half the planet's nations represented on every subway car.
Right.
So a bunch of migrants in New York, you wouldn't notice it. The only thing I have noticed is you have more mothers with children selling like candy on the subway car to markup. Like they'll buy it and then they'll sell it for $1 more than they paid for it and try to make some money that way. Other than that, that's it. That's it. You go downtown. I just gave because I had an old client who asked for it, and I love that client. So I did the only tour I've done in a year for hire like that, aside from our stream, which is a little different. I was walking all around downtown. It's none of that. You don't see. It doesn't look any different. You would not notice this in spite of what you're told. So moving along. These folks are New Yorkers. We will give them the chance to become our neighbors. We'll give them a chance to stay with their families, said New York State Representative Catalina Cruz. Now, again, none of this is to say I am personally sympathetic to what he's saying. First of all, if they're wanted for crimes, that seems to be a no-brainer to me. Like if you're talking about, which they are, they're talking about specifically targeting people who have committed crimes. What's there to even debate about? What's there to even argue about? They're wanted for crimes, of course. Go ahead. Go take them out of the city.
But the people who are wanted for crimes, he's kind of conflating two things because there's no way that there are that many people wanted for crimes to the point where it's creating that big a price tag.
Wait, hold that thought. New York City polls demand crackdown after revelation about criminal migrant population approaching 60,000. Enough of this crap. New York City officials are reacting to a bombshell new report by the Post that shows an alarming 58,626 migrants with felony records or facing criminal charges are freely roaming the Big Apple, with some 670,000 in total across the country. Out of the 759,218 illegal border crossers who now call the 5 boroughs home, You just have to take the loaded language with the Post,
Right.
7.7% were either previously convicted of crimes or had criminal charges pending, according to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement data. But instead of rounding up and deporting tens of thousands of known criminals, critics say the city has rolled out the red carpet with its asylum policies, providing free lodgings, money for food, and even one-way plane tickets anywhere in the world. Meanwhile, politicians told the Post they're reaching their breaking point from the generous giveaways and lax enforcement taking place under NYC's sanctuary city policies and laying blame at the feet of state and federal officials. Quote, Kathy Hochul said she'd be the first one to call ICE if a migrant broke the law. She has over 58,000 phone calls to make, Rep. Mike Lawler, who's weighing a run for governor, told the Post. Kathy Hochul must immediately end New York's sanctuary state status and fully cooperate with ICE to ensure the safety and well-being of all New Yorkers. Mayor Eric Adams has frequently called for sanctuary city rules to be loosened so migrants suspected of serious crimes could be turned over to ICE. However, his honor has thrown his hands up, claiming he lacks the political support of the city council that would be needed to change the controversial laws that prohibit NYC law enforcement from cooperating with immigration officials' investigations. Now, I want to mention this because I really, we always want to be honest. Like I said, I don't see immigrant crime. I don't see migrants degrading quality of life in the city. I tried to look into whether crime rates have gone up. The most I could find, which tells me there are no such numbers, because if there were, the Post would tell you. So this headline, migrants flooding NYC's justice system, making up 75% of arrests in Midtown as pathetic sanctuary city laws handcuff cops. Now, so I took a look at the article, and this is why I'm not even going to use the article. This is all from anonymous sources inside the police department. They do not have any actual numbers to demonstrate this. And given that the New York Post has a relentless bias on ginning up hysteria around this topic, you really can't trust them without hard numbers. So who knows? That having been said, they do talk to people in neighborhoods that I don't go to, that I almost never leave the Harlem neighborhood I live in now that I don't tour guide. So you're talking about places out in the Bronx, places out in Queens, where you're going to have more migrants living, saying that it's become dangerous or it's become overcrowded. I can't say yes or no. I'm not in those places. I suspect they're exaggerating because I know they exaggerate about the place that I live. So why would I think they're not exaggerating about places I don't live? They make it sound like New York is overwhelmed by crime and danger and migrants. Oh, they're all flash mobs are robbing the stores. I believe this did happen someplace. Not happening every place. This isn't happening all over New York. So, yes, they are ginning up hysteria about that. At the same time, I think people, liberals, leftists, what have you, who genuinely mean well, they don't help to make the case for all of the non-criminal migrants when they decide that that's the hill they want to die on, coordinating with ICE to deport criminal migrants. You really don't want to attach your cause to that cause, which is clearly insane. In terms of funding, yes, in a lot of ways, the immigration policies of the Biden administration functioned like an unfunded mandate. You expect these cities to take in these migrants, but you're not going to give them any money for it. Again, cities can't print their own currency. So that money has to come from somewhere, which I think was a valid point that he made. I think, again, if you're sympathetic to these migrants and you don't want very racist, frankly, kind of voices to dominate the conversation, you can't put yourself in a position where you're tying your defense of immigrants who very often have been forced out of their countries due to U.S. foreign policy destroying their societies. If you want to stand up for those people, you can't be making the argument, no, you can't work with ICE to get rid of criminals. And you also can't make the argument that the whole society should have to pay for this and that it is on New York City to take money out of other programs to pay for migrants. Even if you think that's the moral thing to do, that's not, you're never convincing a majority of people of that. It just turns people to the right.
But you see, okay, so the question I have remains. So let's assume that that's correct and that there's just under 60,000 migrants with criminal records or pending criminal charges and or sentencing in the city. For that to equal a $6 billion strain on the system, just the criminals alone, that you're talking about $100,000 expenditure per person.
Well, they're talking about the whole of the policy.
Right. No, they're talking about the whole thing. Right. They're talking about the whole thing. So you're not just talking about the criminal migrants at that point. You're talking about the strain that immigration has put on the system. And then you're saying, well, we're going to get the criminals out, implying that that's going to free up a lot of resources. But if you're not going to get the non-criminals out, then it's not going to free up that many resources. So he's kind of tying these two things together in a sort of sleight of hand kind of way. I mean, how many migrants are at Randall's Island? 2,000. That's the biggest housing facility that they've set up. It's a few hundred at the Roosevelt Hotel. There are a couple other hotels. One in the outer boroughs. I forget. I think there's one downtown, something like that. So the real question is how much money, how many of the city's resources are going to be freed up if you limit the deportation to criminal migrants? Don't really have a clear answer on that. My suspicion is not many resources are going to be freed up.
But Adams, again, to be fair, and I have no love of Eric Adams, to be fair, if you look at the history of his statements about this, I think on the one hand, he feels legitimately, as I think most people do, if you got criminals, of course, get rid of them. On the other hand, he has been saying throughout this crisis that the federal government should be giving them money to pay for this. So I would say that's the other side of his argument. Why is New York City stuck paying for this? And that's really what he's putting at the feet of the Biden-Harris administration.
Well, sure.
That they expected New York City to fulfill these very liberal immigration policies, which again, I believe are designed to suppress labor power. I believe that because we live in a country that thinks nothing of funding a genocide. So the idea that we are supporting migrants out of the goodness of our heart, this is the one area where we have a humanitarian policy towards humans. We don't even have a humanitarian policy towards our own citizens, as we just saw in our North Carolina segment. So there's an agenda there. So what possible reason could they have for wanting to flood America with unskilled labor? Well, just when the union movement really starts to take off, you have unprecedented levels of border crossing. Yes, I think those things are connected. But Adams has not been one to really say, get them all out. He's really been saying we need funding for it.
Right. Well, this is what I wanted to say. Someone in the chat said they spend $100,000 per illegal. No, they don't. I'm saying if the $6 billion were going to be freed up by deporting criminal migrants, then that would mean they were spending $100,000 per criminal migrant, which they're obviously not. I said that to make the point that no, you're not actually going to free up that much money if you limit this to just a deportation project targeting criminals. This is why the Trump administration wants to go further than that. Now you could see they're kind of trying to back off of that, saying, well, we're going to start with the ones with the criminal record and go from there. I think
they're
that's
afraid of what it's going to do to prices if they really
course.
follow through on what they're saying.
Yes, because I think they're realizing that they can't really deliver on that promise, without causing more economic disruption, more inflation, which they were elected to sort of help tamp down.
Please clap.